Hi there. I'm here with In Focus panelists Jennifer Wagner-Chartier and Mike Murphy on this May primary election night, talking about some of the results across the state of Indiana. Mike and Jennifer, we had that 9th district race closely watched, the GOP primary, 9 different candidates. Really no surprise, Mike. Aaron Houck, victorious, the former state senator, will face Matthew Fife in the fall in that 9th district race.
Yeah, Houchins has done a good job of being very patient after losing the primary in 2016 to Hollingsworth. She went through re-election in the Senate, did a great job as the state senator. She's a conservative voice. She's a woman. She's going to do a really good job representing the Southern Indiana in Congress. Sadro, frankly, kind of a caricature of his old self, yesterday's news, and Barnes Israel, just a rookie, still trying to get some name ID. So Houchins, outstanding victory in the 9th.
Jennifer, that is a red district. Houchin, obviously the favorite to win in the fall. We've also got a Senate race in Indiana this year where Todd Young's a big favorite. We did also see a huge story here in national politics that could have a huge impact on this year's midterm elections. Do you think there are political ramifications that shake up some of these races in Indiana that we suspect to be solid red districts or races where Republicans are heavily favored? Do you think that the news this week out of the Supreme Court changes any of that this year?
I would like to think that it would change some of the calculus this year because the reality is that in a lot of these races, there are rights at stake for women. There are potentially marriage rights, other things that come out of that penumbra of the right of privacy that appears to be going to be overturned by the Supreme Court. But I don't know, to be honest with you. We're a very red state. And even if we weren't a very red state, we're a very pro-life state. That said, I think there are some candidates running, almost all of whom are female on the Democratic side, who are going to be able to take this issue and really raise it up and speak to portions of the electorate that maybe they haven't been speaking to before, or maybe women who haven't come out because they didn't think they could make a difference could now make a difference in some of these state house races.
And Mike, at the state house tonight, we've seen a couple of incumbents be primaried. Not all of them, though, lost to someone on their right flank tonight, it doesn't appear.
No, I will have to say, though, Dan, that the victory tonight really belongs to Todd Houston and no one else. I mean, everybody won individual races, certainly. But Todd Houston has been able, by defeating Kurt Nicely heavily with another incumbent, Snow, up in the northern part of the state. And then it looks like he's on his way to defeating John Jacob in southern Marion County. He's really chopped off the head and the tail of the snake that's been lurking in the weeds against him. And so if those guys had won and added to their numbers, they would have created a voting bloc that Houston would have had to negotiate with. He's destroyed their power, their leadership, and if anybody does win from that group, they'll be minor players. And so the real win goes to Todd Houston tonight. And there is one incumbent. I'm personally disturbed that he's going to lose, because he's a great conservative from Huntington County, is Dan Leonard, who was rumored to be in line to be the next Ways and Means chairman. He's had some tough races in the past. He had a new district. He only, at this point tonight, has 52% of his home county, which is Huntington County. That's not enough to win when you have a largely new district with 2 or 3 new counties.
Jennifer, what else stood out tonight at the State House? We had that crowded Democratic primary in Senate District 46, where it appears a newcomer to politics. Andrea Hunley has won that race in a closely watched race there in Senate District 46 in Indianapolis.
Yeah, I was just switching over to check the latest returns from Marion County to make sure that was still tracking the way that it has been all night. I think the future is female. I think that, on the other side of the aisle, Aaron Houchin is proving that in CD9, that, voters want more female candidates. Obviously, in House District 46, they had a choice from 4 incredibly good candidates who ran very different but very solid campaigns. I think Andrea went very much heavy on the digital side. And for those of us who work in politics, it's telling that she came out this victorious in a 4-way primary. And I think for those who do this for a living, that's a very good sign that maybe the future is a little bit more online and not necessarily all direct mail and phones. The other big takeaway, though, here in Marion County is Andrea Hundley was not the slated candidate in House District 46. She was not. I thought Ashley Easton, who has also bucked the slate once before, would do well in that race. And honestly, a down ticket in the countywide races. It looks like Chris Becker is going to lose that race for recorder. That's kind of a no-name race, but he was the slated candidate. So for those of us on the inside, and I know, Mike, you've been a county party chairman, this could portend the end of the slating process, which I personally have had some issues with over the years because it, doesn't necessarily always feel that democratic. But I think House District 46 is a big harbinger in the future of the slating process.
Yeah, and slating certainly came up in the race for county clerk as well, where it certainly was brought into the spotlight in that race. Mike, what else stood out to you on this May primary election night across the state of Indiana?
Well, I think despite some incumbents losing, I think you also have to look at the open seats. There is a natural rollover in both the Republican and Democratic parties, which is good for the legislature. It's good for the debate of ideas. I'll pick out one. In Morgan, Johnson, and Hendricks County, a brand new seat, retired Lieutenant Colonel Craig Haggard, a former Marine fighter pilot, former head of the NRA in the state of Indiana, pretty much destroyed a Johnson County council member who was allied with John Jacob and Kurt Nicely. He beat her he's got 63% going right now. He beat her by 13% in her home county of Johnson and got 80% in his home county of Morgan. He's going to be an outstanding state legislator. And again, an example of new blood coming into the system, which only portends good things for the Republican Party.
Jennifer, what do you see tonight with the winners we've seen already this evening in terms of matchups this now sets up for the fall that you'll be watching?
I mean, I wish I could say there were more competitive seats. I think there's a couple maybe down in Evansville, a couple in the donut counties here and around Marion County. Unfortunately, the maps are pretty gerrymandered. And, to the victor go the spoils, and Republicans are in charge. So not a huge surprise they would draw maps that are favorable to Republicans. I am interested longer term in watching, the outcomes of the races, like Bob Baining, for example. Long time, I work in K-12 education, so long time education champion, had a very strong challenge from the right. We'll see how that turns out. I do wonder, if there are small gains to be made this cycle and into the next couple of cycles by more progressive candidates. Again, I go back to Marion County, and there is definitely a part of the Democratic Party that Republicans like to label and say, oh, it's just the far left. But some of those progressive ideas actually align a great deal with some libertarian ideas and even some conservative values. So I wonder if longer term, there will be sort of a trend to the middle instead of the extremes that we're seeing in some of these races tonight.
Mike, any final thoughts for you?
Two big races I think we haven't talked about yet that featured high profile names. In just west of us, in Boone and Hendricks County, in a new House seat, we have former state rep, former House parliamentarian Matt Whetstone, who may have been tainted somewhat by a perception of his involvement with, some of the nothing alleged against him, of course, but with his connections to Rod Radcliffe and the gambling industry. At this point, he's in third place in a primary for essentially his old seat. And I think that's very surprising. He could still pull it off. And then in the congressional 1st District Republican primary, the former mayor of LaPorte, Blair Milo, who's also a Holcomb cabinet member, is, last I looked, with about 40% of the vote in, is getting whipped 51-18 by another female veteran African-American woman. And it's really surprising that Blair Milo is performing so poorly at this point.
Jennifer Ruth Green appears victorious there in that 1st District primary. She'll face Congressman Frank Mervan there in the fall in a race that really will be very closely watched, Jennifer, with Republicans trying to pick up seats in the House. They're, in fact, targeting that 1st District seat in Northwest Indiana for the first time in recent memory.
Yeah, and that's a very interesting strategy. I think you're going to see something similar here in the prosecutor's race, which we haven't really talked about because there was no contest in Marion County on either side. But I think you're going to see Republicans testing out the waters in some traditionally Democratic areas, trying to see if they can pick up some votes, certainly here in Marion County on the issue of crime and public safety, which has been top of mind, but then also in places like Northwest Indiana, which really are not really it is the region, but it's a region made up of much smaller municipalities. And so can they make some inroads in those communities? I have my doubts, but it's something to watch.
All right. We'll be watching it all with you all year long. No doubt about it. Mike, Jennifer, thanks so much. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks for being with us on this election night. I'll just send some pizza your way since you weren't here to enjoy us today. Thanks, everybody.